The till metaphor: corruption, state capture, and criminal infiltration of the justice system. The easiest way to understand the difference is to imagine that the state is a shop and the public resources are kept in a till. The question is not only who stole from the till. The deeper question is who controls the shop and what happens when security comes looking for the thieves. Corruption is stealing from the till. Corruption is the simplest level. Someone abuses public position, power, or relationship to obtain an improper benefit. The institution itself does not necessarily have to be captured. Someone simply finds a way to extract something from it. The objective is to get something from the system. It can be money, a favor, a contract, a kickback, an improper benefit. In this till metaphor that I started with, corruption is simply stealing from the till. This till belongs to the shop, and the shop, in our instance, is the public resources. The rules still exist, the security system still exists, but somebody has abused their position to take something they were not entitled to. A perfect example is the former speaker, the state versus Nosiviwe Mapisa Magula, case number 33/2024, is currently going on at the Gauteng Division High Court. This case is a simple example, classic classroom example of corruption. Now, we move on to state capture. State capture is when you control people who control the till. The state capture goes much further. You are no longer satisfied with occasional stealing from the till. You want influence over how the shop itself operates. So you influence who becomes the manager of the shop, who gets the keys to the shop, who chooses the suppliers, the tenders. This is where the tender system comes in. Who gets what tender? Who approves payment? Who sits on the board? Who makes institutional decisions? And potentially who conducts the audit? Now, you do not have to approach the till every time you want something. The till can systematically just work for you because you've controlled the whole shop. The target, therefore, is not simply the money. The target is the institution, the shop itself. Appointments, leadership, procurement, policy, and institutional decisions can be bent towards the private interest. The objective: make the system work for you. Control how the system operates. Make the state serve your private interest. That is why state capture is fundamentally different from an isolated corruption transaction like the Mapisa Nosiviwe situation. Corruption asks, what can I get from the system? State capture asks, how can I make the system repeatedly produce the outcomes that I want? An example for analysis: Lucky Montana and the Prasa files. The allegations, the evidence, the answers, all the way from the Zondo Commission to the breaking news with the SIU, a 6-year trail story. This is the territory examined extensively by the Zondo Commission: appointments, procurements, institutional decision-making, relationships between public officials and public interest, and the movement of public money. State capture is equal to controlling the institution. Now we move on to the third one: criminal infiltration of the justice system. This time, you get inside the security room that is overseeing the institution. Now you reach something different. The criminal does not necessarily need to control the entire shop. The criminal needs to access to the people responsible for catching the thieves. Hope you understand. Let me repeat it. The criminal needs access to the people responsible for catching the thieves. So you put people inside the security room. Then, when the alarm goes off, you may be able to influence what happens next. Criminal infiltration does not necessarily require capturing an entire institution. A criminal network may only need strategically placed people at critical choke points. Someone who can leak an investigation, warn about an impending arrest, reveal who is investigating who, compromise the evidence, interfere with a docket. Remember the severe dockets, frustrate an investigation, undermine a prosecution, identify witnesses, or protect members of the network. And remember, Advocate Andrea Johnson warned General Khan about an investigation against him. All that is infiltration into the justice system. That is what makes infiltration conceptually different from full institutional capture. You don't necessarily own the building. You have people inside the building who can open the right doors. The important distinction: the thief has not necessarily captured the shop. The thief may have infiltrated the people responsible for catching thieves. That is criminal infiltration. Everything that is happening to IDEC right now. But there is another threshold. Suppose the network becomes powerful enough to influence who becomes the head of security, who investigate particular cases, which investigations receive resources, which cases are prioritized, which investigators are removed, which information reaches decision makers, which disciplinary processes proceed, and ultimately, which cases live and which cases die. At that point, we may no longer be talking about infiltration. The question has become: has the enforcement machinery itself been captured? The Ekurhuleni question, state capture in uniform, the state versus Imogen Mashazi and 3 others. Remember this case? The allegations around the Ekurhuleni matter provide a useful case study through which to examine the distinction between individual corruption, criminal infiltration, and possible institutional protection. One particularly important feature is what happened when accountability was supposed to follow. IPID issued instructions that Julius should be face disciplinary processes, yet responsibility for making that process happen appears on the evidence being examined to have moved through different institutional hands. HR pointed to legal raised management or procedural issues. Management could point towards HR or legal advice. Mkhwananzi disputed the basis of the discipline altogether. The result was striking. Everyone could explain why the process had not happened, but the process still did not happen. That does not itself establish criminal infiltration or capture, but it raises precisely the institutional questions. Was this ordinary bureaucratic failure or someone being protected? Now we move on to the IDEC saga. What happens when questions arise about the security room itself? Madanga Commission has brought another dimension to the till metaphor. IDEC is part of a specialist investigative machinery. In our shop metaphor, IDEC is inside the security room. What makes allegations concerning the integrity of IDEC particularly serious? The evidence and allegations being examined raise questions about information flows, investigative decisions, relationships, and handling of particular matters. For example, evidence concerning communications involving advocate Andrea Johnson and Major General Feroz Khan raises questions about the movement of sensitive investigative information. The proper question is not to declare from the outset that either person was part of a criminal protection network. The evidential question is who knew what? When did they know it? Who told them? Why was that information shared and still affect any investigation? Similarly, the project diversion material raises documentary questions concerning the Section 27 referral process, the different affidavit versions, the timing of authorizations, and which documents investigators actually received. The disappearance, replacement, and unexplained absence of any expected document does not automatically establish criminal investigation. But inside a criminal justice institution, the integrity of the documentary train matters enormously. That's why Commissioner Valoy was asking Drew Ramsamy if the information only exists in their heads. Is there any paper trail to any of the decisions that IDEC was making? Because the security room depends upon one thing above almost everything else: the integrity of the evidence. The Zondo Commission versus Madlanga Commission. This is where the till metaphor becomes particularly powerful. The two commissions are examining different parts of the shop. So I hear a lot of people on the social media saying Zondo Commission was useless. Zondo Commission was useless. It didn't yield anything. We wasted I don't know how many billions of rands. But today I implore you to start thinking about the Zondo Commission differently, because I have been going back to listen to some of those testimonies and also understand what went wrong after the Zondo Commission ended. So the Zondo Commission is investigating who was around the till. Imagine the shop being captured. Certain private interests allegedly influenced who ran the shop, who supplied the shop, who received the tenders, who approved expenditures, how institutional decisions were made, and where public money ultimately went. Then the Zondo Commission walks into the shop and switches the lights. It effectively says, here are the transactions, here are the relationships, and here are the officials, here are the companies, here are the matters requiring further investigation. At that point, however, the commission's job, that's where it ends. Zondo is not the police station. Zondo cannot take these matters to court. So it was not the prosecuting authority. It could expose, document, make findings, and recommend further action. The next stage belonged to the criminal justice system. The files moved from the Zondo Commission, from the till, to the security room, and that is IDEC. Institutions such as IDEC then had the responsibility within their respective mandates to investigate appropriate referrals, build admissible criminal cases, and where the evidence justified it, institute prosecutions. And that creates an entirely new vulnerability. But that did not happen. So that doesn't mean the Zondo Commission was useless. IDEC, the security room that is called IDEC, was supposed to handle these files and take them to court. Post-Zondo problem, the alleged captors do not necessarily need to capture the till again. They don't need to go back. They've been flushed out of all the SOEs by the Zondo Commission. The money may have already left the till. Their new problem is the security now has the file. IDEC now has the evidence and the files. The threat has changed. Yesterday, the criminal network needed to give us the contract. Today, they are saying make the investigation never become successful or never make it to court. This is what we can describe conceptually as post-capture protection. The original objective was extraction. Now the new objective becomes impunity.
In 2023, I had been given a docket where the former head of crime intelligence, Lieutenant General Jacobs, is supposed to have been accused number one. And when I was one statement short from being able to enroll the matter against 3 suspects in the matter.
You were in IDEC at that time?
I'm in IDEC at the time. That is one of the 3 matters that I indicated in statement 1 where Advocate Johnson point blank refused to let me proceed. In fact, she held a meeting saying that those dockets were going to be sent to SECU, but they had come through the Zondo Commission. And it was around that time that I was putting the link of Advocate Johnson's husband, crime intelligence, and this matter, because people talk. And I was also asking the investigating officer, why are we being blocked? And then I had heard about Advocate Johnson's husband and Mr. Khan being friends. Then all of this happened. So I put 4 and 4 together, and I realized that there were other aspects at play, which made me even more cautious with my note-taking, my written objections, notifying management of how procedures are not being followed. And
now
fact that,
steps in Madlanga Commission. It enters the very same shop. Madlanga is not simply repeating what Zondo Commission did. It is entering a different room. Madlanga Commission is going straight into the security room. It is going straight into the SAPS, going straight into IDEC and asking what has been happening here all this time. The questions, therefore, are different. Who controlled the investigations? Who selected the investigators? Who initiated particular investigations? Who hired Advocate Johnson to be the head of the security room? What matters were not investigated? What matters were investigated? Who had relationships with who? Who possessed sensitive information? Who leaked information? Who intervened? Who was protected? What dockets were blocked? Some dockets were removed from the SAPS and IPID and taken to IPID, to IDEC, where proper processes followed, and why? These are questions about integrity of the enforcement machinery itself. Importantly, allegations are not findings. Evidence of irregularity does not automatically improve infiltration. Failure does not automatically prove protection. Delay does not automatically prove capture. But once credible evidence raises questions, the institutional response itself becomes something that must be examined. The 2 commissions in one shop. The Zondo, who is asking who was robbing the shop and how did they get control of the till. Zondo pathway was broadly power, appointments, institutional control, procurements, tenders, and money. Madlanga, on the other hand, is saying what happened when the people responsible for catching the robbers may themselves have been compromised. Madlanga's pathway is closer to the criminal networks and private interest. The Madlanga Commission is looking into the access, the insiders, information, investigations, interference protection, and impunity. And the ultimate question is whether infiltration ever became something more serious. Control of the enforcement machinery itself, the complete till model, it therefore be reduced to three simple concepts. Corruption, you steal from the till. The objective is to get something from the system. State capture is to control the people who control the till. The objective is to make the system work for you. The criminal infiltration of the justice system. Put yourself inside the security room. The objective is control what happens when the alarm goes off. And all these three begin interacting, the machinery can potentially become the state capture.